Higher vampires are perhaps one of, if not the most powerful monster species in The Witcher. Not only because they are fast, generally view humans and non-humans alike as prey, and each hone their own powerful special ability, but also because of their intelligence, ability to appear human, and the fact that in CDPROJEKTRED Witcher lore, they are essentially immortal, as they can only be slain by other higher vampires. In today's Witcher lore video, I will be explaining the full story of Emiel Regis Rohellec Terzieff-Godefroy, or more simply Regis, the most well-known of the higher vampires, at least for us players. But before getting into his full story, I want to discuss his appearance and some basic abilities. So Regis appears as an older man with grey hair, some pretty cool sideburns, and unique attire, appearing to be more of a herbalist or barber surgeon than a blood-sucking monster. Although, as we of course know, this vampire is not by any means of the term a blood-sucking monster, but an intelligent and thoughtful creature that is both deadly and friendly. As a higher vampire, he has honed various unique special abilities, but also possesses all the typical higher vampire abilities. So that would essentially be immortality other than from other higher vampires, the ability to regenerate, general immunity and invulnerability to lots of different things that would normally kill somebody, shape-shifting or polymorphing, invisibility or intangibility, so for example the smoke forms we frequently see, or mist forms. Superhuman physicality, so enhanced strength, general enhanced senses, night vision, scent, hearing far beyond the general human, hypnosis or mental domination, telepathy, communication, and generally just increased resistance compared to, say, a person. And of course the higher vampire form we see in the games. So for Regis in particular, like most higher vampires, he can influence humans' minds, but Regis's hypnotic abilities are even a tier above other higher vampires. This is showcased multiple times throughout the books, and he also has a particular gift to appear human. And this is not only through masking his scent. We can see Oriana and Dettlaff are able to appear human, but Regis can even adjust his heart rate, making it difficult for even witches to detect his true nature. And when I say masking his scent, of course I mean through his concoction of herbs. He can also seemingly communicate with ravens, as he has them even watch his friends' movements from time to time, and also transform into a unique bat-like form. Yes, all higher vampires can polymorph to some degree, but when compared with, say, Dettlaff's other form, the two look quite different. So Regis's giant bat-like form is unique to him. Now onto his story, and buckle in because it is a long one, and this is a very condensed version of his story, and of course if you want to have the full story of Regis, the best way is to read the books, but here is the overview. Regis appears in both the Witcher books and games and plays a central role in both, acting as Geralt's friend and sparring partner in philosophical debates. His story begins in the world of the Enshea, or the world of the Witcher, so that's the world where the books and games generally take place, and not the vampire homeworld. This point seems to be heavily debated as it has never been explicitly revealed where Regis first came into existence. However, Regis mentions to Geralt in the Witcher book Baptism of Fire that he is 428 years old by the human calendar, which would mean he was born after the conjunction of the spheres, and Regis mentions that higher vampires aren't necessarily born, they just sort of come into existence. However, in Blood and Wine, he frequently references the vampire's homeworld and seems to reminisce in a way that would imply he has been there. However, my interpretation of this is he is simply reminiscing about the stories he would have been told by the older vampires, or perhaps he has experienced something closer to the vampire homeworld through locations like the Unseen Elder of Toussaint's Cave. This lore may be updated later on, but for now we can assume that he came into existence in the world of the Enshea, unless he lied to Geralt about his age. In his youth, Regis was pressured by other vampires to drink blood, I should say pressured socially, something higher vampires do not need to survive on, but it is seen as akin to like alcohol for humans, so it could help a higher vampire fit in with certain social groups. Drinking blood helped him to gain confidence, he no longer felt shy around vampire women, however he soon became addicted and instead of partaking with friends, he began to fly around alone, with a single drop of blood being enough to send him into a crazed, blood-frenzied state. Some undisclosed amount of time later, he settled down with a female vampire, who quickly left him after she couldn't cope with his addiction. Also, apparently at some point during his past, he was with the Queen of the Night, which is a vampire that appears in The Witcher 1, and we don't know when this was. It could have been this vampire vampire he was with that's mentioned to have left him at some point, but this is not confirmed. Anyway, his addiction came to an end after he was sent to retrieve blood by some friends, and he flew haphazardly through the night, eventually crashing into a villager's well and incapacitating himself. The villagers chopped off his head, stabbed him with stakes and poured holy water onto him, finishing with burying him underground. He then spent the next 50 years regenerating underground, and after that experience, decided it best to not drink blood again. After regenerating, he changed his life. He had 2 homes, one for the summer and one for the winter. In the winter, he stayed in Dillingen, and in the summer, he stayed in a small cottage near an old elven cemetery called Fen Khan. It was here that Regis first met Geralt and his friends. In August 1267, Geralt and his group of friends were trying to avoid the main roads due to the outbreak of the Second Nilfgaard-Nordling War. They were near the elven cemetery of Fen Khan when Regis noticed them and attempted to slip away. However, Geralt noticed the movement and followed Regis's trail, eventually finding his cottage and ordering him to come out. Regis stunk of a strange concoction of herbs, spices and incense that he used to mask his scent, and introduced himself, offering the company some of his home-brewed mandrake moonshine. The group drank together, and Regis enjoyed conversing with other intelligent races, particularly Geralt, about philosophy, potion making, and the like, so decided to join the group on their quest to Nilfgaard, where they hoped to find Ciri. Shortly after leaving, the company ran into a group of peasants who believed a vampire was hiding in the area. Milva, Geralt's archer friend, punched them after they demanded her black mare, who they believed could find a vampire's home. Milva shortly after threw up, which led to Regis to conclude that she must be pregnant, once again showing his emotional intelligence. The group continued and eventually reached the Shotla River, where a woman was being accused by the locals of being a witch, and Geralt's company intervened. They were asked to complete a task to prove her innocence, bringing a red-hot horseshoe out of the fire without receiving any injury. Regis completed it with ease, and of course the locals started screaming at him, claiming he had performed black magic. This was all cut off by the Nilfgaardians, who suddenly attacked. Due to his unique abilities, Regis was able to quickly hide from the soldiers, while Geralt and Dandelion were captured and taken to Fort Armeria. He rendezvoused with Milva, who was now joined by Kahir, a Vicovarian, Nilfgaardian, noble, who Geralt disapproved of, to say the least. Regis calmly explained the situation to them both and then used his powers to enter the fort and rescue Geralt and Dandelion. Geralt quickly realised what Regis was after this and thanked him, but warned him that he should leave quickly. However, Regis did not leave, as Dandelion had been injured and he wanted to help, despite Geralt pointing a sword at his throat and revealing his true nature to the rest of the group. Regis confronted Geralt directly and asked if Geralt would ever take on a contract to kill him, which Geralt begrudgingly denied, half joking that no one could even afford it. Regis then seemingly departed. However, he continued to follow the group, undetected for a considerable distance, and at night once again joined them, offering to change Dandelion's bandages. Geralt had cooled off at this point and almost unwillingly talked with Regis about his desire to continue alone, accepting him back into the company. After joining the rest of the group for dinner, the group discussed Ciri, as they now knew that she was not in Nilfgaard. Regis suggested going to Kied, as he had a friend who could help them to gain knowledge on her, and without any other option, the group decided to go. Regis revealed his history on this journey and dispelled various vampire myths. He also talked with Milva about prevention methods for her pregnancy, offering her a concoction of sorts, and she later opted to keep the pregnancy. However, they later ended up stuck between Temerian guerrilla soldiers and Nilfgaardians, and Milva was struck with a crossbow bolt. Regis helped her, but sadly she miscarried. The group continued to where they believed the druids were, only to find out that they had moved south. Geralt was also blackmailed into being tasked with destroying the Nightingale gang, and Angolimer, a new addition to the company, told Geralt that those hunting him knew he was travelling with 4 companions. Geralt went to discuss this with Regis, eventually accusing Kahir of being a traitor and getting into a fistfight with him. Regis told Geralt that he believed that they saw 4 and not the true number of 5 companions, as mages could not see vampires with a certain method of spying. So Geralt apologised and the group decided to split. One would go to find Skiro and the Nightingale gang to confront his group and stop their pursuit, while finding more information on Ciri, while the other would go to find the druids as originally planned. However, while Regis, Milva and Dandelion made their way to Toussaint to find the druids, Geralt, Kahir and Angolimer went to Belhaven and were attacked. Angolimer went to find Regis and the others to explain that the Nightingale gang and Shiro had followed them, and Kahir was injured. Regis sent Angolimer with his group on ahead to Toussaint and the druids, and then went to find Geralt and Kahir. He found them and told Geralt he had managed to contact his druid friend, Flaminka, and she had told Geralt to enter the cave of Tir na Bor Arianna to find his answers. Skipping forward slightly to keep the focus generally on Regis, this brings us to Toussaint, where the group spent many months, as Toussaint was a semi-autonomous duchy and provided relative safety for the group, and Geralt did not want to leave. Geralt introduced Regis as a count, and due to her love of dandelion, Duchess Anna Henrietta allowed the group to stay in the palace of Beauclair. Geralt developed a relationship with Fringilla Vigo, and Regis became involved with a succubus, although this succubus was involved with a variety of men in Toussaint. The group became confused as to why Geralt seemed to want to stay in Toussaint, and Regis had to frequently quell their fears and tell them that they would move on when Geralt was ready. In January, Geralt left one morning to complete a contract, and Angoulême confronted Fringilla, asking why she wouldn't encourage Geralt to leave. Regis informed Angoulême that she did not want Geralt to leave and wanted him to stay there with her, and then Fringilla and Regis got into an argument, and Regis claimed that Geralt was in a sort of dream state now, but would eventually remember the importance of his task and continue on to Ciri. The very next morning, Geralt decided that they would leave as he had overheard a conversation that revealed the location of Vilgefortz, the mage that sought Ciri, who was in Stigger Castle. They travelled over mountains and rivers, and after many months reached Stigger Castle. Regis went into scout, utilising his abilities, and drained the blood of one of his attackers, which drove him into a crazed-like state. He met Ciri, who told him to relay information to Geralt that Yennefer was also being held in the castle. Regis relayed this and eventually joined Geralt and Yennefer, who were confronting Vilgefortz. He swiftly went to attack him, but Vilgefortz unleashed a powerful spell on the vampire, ripping his body apart and turning him into a pool of goo on the floor. This is where some recent lore comes in to explain how Regis appeared in Blood and Wine, as by the book's lore, Regis essentially finds his end at the hand of Vilgefortz. So many of you may now have the image of Dettlaff arriving and reviving Regis in Stigger Castle, but in actuality, Regis was first partially revived by Sabrina Glevizig, who went to Stigger Castle to investigate what had happened and saw the pool that was once Regis. She purposely revived him as she wanted information, but upon awakening, he was starving and fled, blinded by hunger. Then Dettlaff found him and nurtured him back to full strength. In the town of Warfoot, Dettlaff made his home in a bell tower. He would then kidnap locals and break their necks, dropping them in the basement of the tower for Regis to feed on. Dettlaff was then attacked by a witcher, Sorensen, who was hired by Sabrina Glevizig to capture them, and it is then revealed that Dettlaff is a vampire of the Garisham tribe, although nothing is said regarding Regis's tribe. Regis and Dettlaff flee far from the town and make their base in a makeshift hospital, although Regis refuses to feed on the dying there. Dettlaff's wounds also won't heal, and he complains to Regis, asking how a human was able to do this to a higher vampire, and Regis tells him that it was a witcher and not an ordinary human. Regis and Dettlaff then approached a group of largely Temerian deserters, Erskine, Ossian, Neris, and a wounded sergeant, Arnault, although the sergeant is not a deserter but was sort of kidnapped by the group from the field hospital to lead them to a hidden stash. The two offer medical help and join the company. The group travel together while Sorensen follows, and throughout the journey, Regis tries to convince Dettlaff of the good in human nature, but various events change his mind. For example, the group reach a farm, where the deserters plan to rob it for its horses, but the vampires instead pay with an ancient and incredibly valuable gold coin for one of the horses. Sorensen is following in the meantime, and after reaching the farm, takes the coin, knowing the vampires travelled this way. Dettlaff also expressed his disgust at the way the humans acted when they reached this farm and they tried to rob them. The group continued and became split up after a fight broke out on the Ina River. Regis and Dettlaff rescued Neris, who had fallen into the ice below, and the other members of the group fled, leaving Regis, Dettlaff, and Neris as a new group. After travelling for some time and reaching Regis's old home, Neris eventually found out about the true nature of Regis and Dettlaff. And then eventually all of the groups, including the Witcher Sorensen, converged at an old mill, where the sergeant said he had hid the treasure. The Witcher reached the sawmill and talked with Erskine and Ossian, who had arrived before him, telling them about the vampires, explaining how they had paid the farm with very valuable gold coins, and then enlisted their help with capturing them in order to take the coins, although he of course wanted to get the coin from Sabrina. The group then sprang this trap when the vampires and Neris arrived and nearly defeated Dettlaff while Regis was badly injured by the Witcher. However, Dettlaff managed to call a group of, assumedly vampires, after being betrayed by Nedis, who leapt at the chance to change sides upon hearing the group plan to rob Dettlaff of his ancient gold coins, despite the vampires saving her. Dettlaff eventually has his vampires kill them all. Meanwhile, Regis fed on the deceased body of the sergeant, regained his strength mid-fight after being severely injured by the Witcher. He then defeats the Witcher, but did not kill him, instead he told him that he is no monster. Regis and Dettlaff then met, and Dettlaff told Regis that he now understands the true nature of humans, greedy and self-serving. Regis disagreed and the two parted ways. But this story ends in an interesting way, as Dettlaff returned to the farm and paid the farmer and his daughter 2 of the ancient gold coins. She at first refused, saying it was her own stupidity that got the coins taken in the first place, and Dettlaff informed her that it was a thank you for teaching him another aspect of human nature. It's also important to note that Sorensen left the 2 vampires alone, especially because Regis did not kill him and essentially abandoned the contract. This brings us to Regis' story in Blood and Wine, which, to briefly summarise, after the previously discussed events, Regis returned to his home in Dillingen and lived a peaceful life. He travelled to Toussaint only after realising his friend Dettlaff was the one killing the prominent members of Toussaint's court. Regis met Geralt after protecting him from Dettlaff, and the two began to work together on finding him. The two brewed a resonance potion using a combination of rare ingredients, one of which required making Regis go into a blood frenzy. They learned that Dettlaff was being blackmailed into killing the victims, despite sometimes developing strong friendships with them, and eventually learned that Siana, the sister of the Duchess of Toussaint, was behind the killings and that she had masterminded it as a form of revenge. At this point, Geralt and Regis can visit the Unseen Elder of Toussaint to force Dettlaff to come to Tesh Mutna or retrieve Siana from an enchanted world contained in a storybook. Then after bringing her to Tesh Mutna, Dettlaff can either come and kill her, or she is saved via a magic ribbon. The outcome, regardless, for Dettlaff and Regis is one of two. Dettlaff is killed permanently by Regis after a fight with Geralt and Regis is considered an outcast, hunted by his own kind for betraying them, living a life on the run from his own kind. Or Siana is killed, Dettlaff can be allowed to leave, and Regis pursues him, trying to heal him in the same way Dettlaff helped him. So it is a long story, and without a doubt there are many small nuances that can only be understood from reading the books yourself, but for a general overview, perhaps fans that just want to play the games and have a general idea about what Regis' story was prior to this, I think this video is quite useful for that. But essentially that is an overview of Regis' full story in the Witcher series so far. To conclude, Regis is a central character to the story of The Witcher. He is present during almost the entire journey Geralt undertakes to find Ciri. He rescues Geralt and other members of his group multiple times and plays a central role in Blood and Wine, the final expansion for The Witcher 3, even being present for Geralt's iconic scene where he decides to seemingly retire in Toussaint. His influence on the fandom, his position as a powerful monster and close friend, all make him essential to the Witcher universe. I hope we get to see him in future entries to the series, be that sequels or prequels, and I for one will always look forward to seeing him in Blood and Wine, as he elevates that entire expansion with his presence. For me, he is a highlight of the Witcher series, and I really hope we get to see more of him. Anyway, thank you for watching today's video. If you enjoyed it, please like the video, please subscribe for more. Thank you to the members for your direct support. It really does help with these videos, and it's just incredibly kind that you decide to contribute in that way. But of course, anyone that just watches, shares the video, that is much appreciated. Thank you for watching today, everybody, and good luck on your adventures.